This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 16th of January 2024 at home in Wicklow. And it is an episode that is philosophical in nature, and particularly looking at the existential branch of philosophy, which is fundamentally trying to make sense of the existential challenge. The what am I doing? The why am I doing it? How am I doing it? And I don't spend too much time talking about is there any point. But in this particular episode, I just found myself bringing some recent reflections to bear on that idea and my attraction to the reference points are the philosophical frames of pathways and arrivals and empty spaces, and also the idea of demystifying the sort of ideas or the practices that we think lie in the hands of others or lie in the hands of those we might get to help us. I prefer to think that we can find some great things within ourselves with which to serve ourselves better. So that is what's coming up. I was trying to make it a shorter episode than usual. I did that. Still not as short as I was aiming for, but not as long. The last couple of episodes were slightly on the longer side, so you'll be able to squeeze this in on your commute. Okay, that's it. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my moji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope wherever you've come from has brought you to a good place, and I hope you're not feeling too concerned or overwhelmed or anxious at the great unknown that lies ahead, the uncontrollables, the X factors, the endless variables. Now, if that sounds like an ominous place to start, maybe it's a reflection of where my head's at. No, I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling a little bit weary. But I want today's episode to be short, maybe even the shortest episode I've recorded in the history of the show. Just to experiment, just to mix it up, but also not just to also to resist the. It's more than a temptation. It's habitual now to fill the space, to resist the habit, or to play with that habit, or just put a little stop valve on the habit of I can fill this space with lots of other things that pass through my brain. Maybe it's worth challenging that, and I find that stuff challenging. I find changing patterns and changing habits, I find it stress-inducing, because I'm good at leaning into the things that I trust are serving me well, and that I may even be doing well, and that I can fit into a larger philosophical frame and perhaps an existential or existentialist philosophy frame, to kind of contextualize choices, decisions, actions, inactions, and I mean, I kind of touched on this last week when I was reflecting on turning 50 and reflecting on reaching this stage of my life, and sort of reflecting on my sort of a life philosophy, and sort of an ethos or whatever, a credo, And certainly I continue to place enormous faith in the idea of a life of the mind, a life of thought, consideration. And I don't always, I'm not always totally secure in, with that. I have times when I just go, what the hell? What the hell am I doing? And there's a very simple truth that occupying our time with work, career, a job, while it has obvious material benefits, for many there's a very and maybe just an unspoken but very substantial secondary benefit of being immersed in work, is that it's a distraction from ourselves. It's a distraction from the pull of the leaning mind. It's a distraction from that sort of existential curiosity, and that's that can be a great relief when you find yourself with too much time on your hands. I'm just looking out the window here and I see Ruby the cat is on the hunt. She's a tabby cat, and maybe not even 3 years old, so really in the full of her health. She's doing some very stealthy prowling underneath. I guess that's a copper beech hedge, and she kind of camouflages in underneath the bare branches at the bottom of the hedge. So I presume she's onto a bird of some kind. I hope she doesn't catch it, but I try not to interfere in these things. I just saw a branch move. I see her tail is still. Anyway, see, Ruby the cat, she's not wondering what it's all about. She is acting on pure instinct, and absolutely focused on the hunt at the moment. And there's a Zen purity to that. Oh, there's a lot of movement there now. Oh, no. Mission failed. Mission aborted. She's just sprinted past the window. I don't know. It's funny how I associate focus with Zen ideas of the still mind and the decluttered moment, and sprinting across the garden doesn't feel Zen-like at all, even though I find it incredibly funny watching my cats sprint across the garden or across the field. But to be immersed in an activity, of course, and I feel instinctively, and more than instinctively, consciously, there are times when I do the podcast, and a lot of the time when I do the podcast, there's a Zen-like immersion and flow where I'm not hanging on to laid out scaffolding. I'm not following a very well set path. I'm just letting it flow and trying to articulate I really hesitate to say stream of consciousness, because there are too many ways to misconstrue that. I'm not sitting here as a kind of 20th century modernist writer indulging in unintelligible or incredibly complex stream of consciousness, but I feel it's not just babble and flow from some sort of unfettered churn of mental vomit, which is certainly a product of ego. And that type of stream of consciousness, if you call that stream of consciousness, you're elevating, something that doesn't deserve to be elevated. So it's I feel it's something else, and it is flow. So in that regard, there's a stream-like quality to it. But you typically describe it as something akin to a high wire act, where I'm just trying to stay aloft and stay balanced and not fall into the, whatever lies below, the safety net or the sawdust. And part of that skill, if that's, again, not elevating, I'm not trying to elevate what I do, but if that is a skill or a discipline, maybe a practice. I like that word practice, because when you do things again and again, it's practice. Like practicing martial arts, like practicing karate or tai chi or whatever it might be. So this is sort of like a mental practice. It's definitely a verbal practice, and it involves a certain agility to keep pace, or to be sort of mindful of the flow of thought and mindful of connective tissue, is how I think of it. So, further to that, and bearing in mind at the start of this, I said I wanted to be a short episode. Really what I wanted to talk about today is the idea of pathways, empty spaces, and arrivals. And this is I suppose, I've used it already. And the idea of that being put into sort of a lived philosophy, and maybe it's a way to. I think these are frames that can be very useful in terms of making sense of where we are, and maybe making sense of where we've been, and perhaps help us make sense of where we might be going. I said in an episode last year that I'm not really motivated by endpoints. I'm not motivated by big goals or big objectives or apex experiences. I'm very motivated by the path journey. I'm very motivated by the path matrix. Where are you walking? Where are you moving? And not where are you walking to, not where are you moving to, which is destination oriented, but just where are you walking? How are you walking? With whom are you walking? And why are you walking? And I use, I'm using the word walking. I don't mean literally walking. This is more a philosophical, spiritual walking, a metaphorical walking. The walk through life, and the walk into the next moment, and the moving into the next moment. Because I think there's value in bringing our sort of presence of mind to that enterprise. And that enterprise, when we zoom out, is the living of our lives. And I think we can be really burdened by the paths that have gone before, or the paths that we feel have brought us to places that we are not entirely happy with. But I find the path metaphor can be really, really beneficial, particularly in tough times, particularly when you feel embattled. I think in the last 2 episodes I've made references to my 50th birthday party, which was fantastic. You can listen back to those episodes if you're curious to hear my thoughts or what exactly went down. I had a different kind of party last week. I don't know how to describe this party. It was a party where a load of uninvited guests came up, arrived and just kicked the hell out of me. And so basically it was and I'm speaking metaphorically if you hadn't guessed, or if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about. The Darren Aronofsky film Mother comes to mind. I mean, it's amazing to me to think Darren Aronofsky could make a film like Mother, which apparently was a comment on, global warming and environmentalism and ecology. But if that was his larger idea behind it, but ultimately what came out on screen was the idea of male artists and their muses, and how callous a male artist can be with their muse, which of course makes me think of Picasso and the many women that came through his life, and the sexual utility, the artistic utility of muses. And this seems to be particularly a male-female dynamic. I mean, probably works across genders or sexual orientations. But one of the key plot ideas in Mother is how guests arrive at the artist's house. The artist was played by Javier Bardem. Is Javier Bardem underestimated, underrated? He is just such a good actor. I think he's got tremendous versatility. He's just such an interesting actor, such an attractive actor, so charming, capable of such, I don't know, he just always has this innate gravitas. Even in a movie like Lyle Crocodile, which is really not good at all. He's a fallen stage performer who thinks, no, my ticket to the top is this talking crocodile. And of course he's great at being very dark and chilling. But in any case, he's the artist in Darren Aronofsky's Mother, and Jennifer Lawrence is his younger, I think she's his wife, and she's pregnant, and she is most definitely his muse. But people start arriving at their home, to get close to the artist. If I recall correctly, there's a couple arrive, and it was the first time I'd seen Michelle Pfeiffer in a movie in a long time. She's very good, and maybe Ed Harris is the partner. But more and more people arrive, and Jennifer Lawrence is just losing her mind with the stress and the upheaval and the sense of intrusion, and it goes to a very graphic and dark, horrific end. So even though that's I was thinking of that because that was the type of party that happens in Mother. And I was going to say it's amazing to think that Aronofsky can make something like that so original and interesting and provocative, and then make something like The Whale, which I just thought was so well. Of course, he didn't write The Whale; it was based on a stage play, which was just 2 hours of sentimentality. I don't rate that movie at all. See, I'm not afraid of sentimentality, but it has to be attached to something more earned. But that entire movie just felt like sentimentality right from the start, and just not very interesting at all, in my opinion. So yeah, the party that I had was akin to that, akin to what I described in Mother. And the uninvited guests were anxiety and dread and depression and self-loathing, and I don't know where it came from. I don't think I'm having, terrible thoughts around suddenly, reaching this significant age. Significant in the eyes of others. I don't know how significant it is myself. But I had just a really, really, rough couple of days, mental health, a really poor period of intense mental health collapse. And in the middle of it, I was thinking, this is just, this is horrible. There's a viciousness and a ferocity to this that is distressing. And, it pushed me into all my habitual corners where I go when I'm embattled like that in my mind and in my emotions. And I really felt, this feels a bit nastier than usual, and I'm not enjoying this at all. But eventually I landed, some part of my brain or being pulled me out of it and presented again the idea of the path. And this was just part of the path. I just found myself in a dark place on the path where the demons came out. And when I kind of grasped that concept, and maybe the party was already ending. Maybe the guests, these unwanted guests, these uninvited guests. Although, of course, on some subconscious level, they are invited, aren't they? If they're there, they've been invited in somehow. I'm inviting them in on a deep level, and that's wherever this fear or dread emanated from. And I think really what was at the heart of it was facing into another year and assessing some of what I do and questioning, just finding myself internally having deep, doubtful questions about how I'm living my life, and then a lot of other things that kind of feed into that or exacerbate the feelings of uncertainty or instability. So that's uninvited on one level, unwelcome, certainly unwelcome, but maybe not uninvited. Whatever that part of me, maybe that's the devil on the shoulder, or maybe that's the shadow side of my being is just opening the door and going, yeah, come on, shh, in this way. He's looking out the window at squirrels or cats. Come on, sneak in, and now just go to town. Yeah, the booze is over there. Knock yourselves out. There's a punch bag. So maybe those unwanted guests had got bored, with not achieving some sort of dramatic result, and so that gave my brain, my being, whatever, the that inner self that always kind of does know what's going on. It maybe gave it a chance to go, don't forget, this is a path. You're on a path, and eventually the path will take you to somewhere else, and that'll be a different part of the path, or it'll be a turn off one way or the other. And there'll be a change of environment, there'll be a change of circumstances, and you will respond differently in those changed circumstances, in that changed environment. So don't panic too much, because there is a certain amount of panic when you're in that frame of mind. Well, for me anyway. But the path is going somewhere else. I mean, realistically, we never know where the path is going to take us. And even if you want to literalize it and go, yeah, but if I go down this road, or if I take that path, I do know what's there. And sure, we can say that. I mean, that's, objectively, physically, architecturally, environmentally true. But we don't know about the uncontrollables. We don't know what we're bringing to that moment when we arrive at that space. We don't know who else we might encounter there. We don't know what else we might encounter there. There are always variables about which we know very little. There are variables we simply cannot predict. And sometimes when we encounter those variables, they're the very things that throw us off our path. And that's where mindfulness can come in. That's where choosing how we respond can come into play, rather than being reflexive or reactive. They are often the things that can give us a chance to evolve, grow, think of different choices, different responses. And in that regard, they are the unknown. They are the unknowable things. I must. I'm thinking of a very short bit of video I took towards the end of last year. I think it was November, and it was a particularly lovely afternoon. And I was walking from my car along a little path to the sea. And I just took a video of that journey. The journey from the car, across a road, through a fence, along a sand-covered path with big brambles on either side, until the sea revealed itself. And it was kind of beautiful. And the natural shape of the path means the sea doesn't really reveal itself till the last moment, even though I can hear it as I walked. I mean, I'm talking, this is not a long path, this is a short path. I'm talking maybe 1 minute from the car to the shore, or to the end of the path, where you can see the extent of the beach and the sea. And I think at the time what I thought was, wow, how lovely is this? How lovely is this end point? How beautiful. And I tend to throw in other thoughts when I have a little moment like that and go, well, how lucky am I to be here? How fortunate to be here at this very moment. And I just, because I think I was, at the time I was playing with the idea of putting up little tiny clips like that on social media with a voiceover. I may still. But there's arrivals. The idea of arrivals. I've spoken about this before. It's a bit of a theme that I return to. That for many of us, there can be a sort of I don't want to say obsession, but a real focus on where am I trying to get to. Where am I trying to arrive? What's that destination? And usually the idea of that is very much attached to, this is going to get me to a better place, a place with greater opportunities, a new stepping off point that will take me to a better place in my life. And usually it is an ascent or an elevation of some kind. And often it's connected to qualifications, are connected to particular jobs, occupations, promotions. It might be connected to particular destinations. I mean, particular geographical destinations. I want to leave this place and get to that place. Country to city, city to country, continent to other continent. And sometimes that's something we do just to refresh and, reinvent. I think it's why holidays can be so attractive, seductive, cathartic. Just that feeling when you get on a plane and take off and go, I'm leaving it all behind. It's a clean slate. I can start afresh when I land. And plane time it's kind of like decompression time before the re-emergence. It's a strange. It's a liminal zone, isn't it? It's a liminal zone. It's a very particular space with particular circumstances, and all you know is that you'll step out of that zone and go step into something new. And typically, again, if it's holidays, typically that brings a sense of eager anticipation, excitement, a kind of a anticipated thrill of being able to kind of drop the facade, drop the clothes of your normal life, drop what you carry to protect yourself and cover yourself and present yourself in your everyday life. And you get permission to go, nah, I can forget about all of that. And I suppose my argument is, in some way, can we internalize that feeling or that notion or idea into our daily lives? Can we accept the absolute unknowability of the next moment? Can we regard moving from one moment to the next as a great opportunity? Can we regard that as our plane journey, our liminal space? Because we are forever moving into things that are not predetermined. Even though our brain, I think, pulls the universe together in a sort of a conceptual way and a graspable way, so we constantly make sense of what's around us and make sense of our environment and make sense of our circumstances and make sense of probabilities that reassure us and give us, feed into this kind of illusion of control that we indulge all the time. But I think we're forever moving into empty space, because we never know. Truly, we never really know what's coming next. And again, with the idea of flow, the idea of stream, the idea of constant movement, and again, I often cite the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus and his idea of like all life being flux. All life is continuous movement, continuous momentum. And maybe that's maybe that is one of the great battles we face as individuals. This kind of yearning for stillness, this yearning for calmness. And of course, as we find ourselves now well into the 21st century and surrounded by 21st century technology, and I won't do what I so often do and go through the litany of things, the litany of aggravants and accelerants and hyper stimuli that are all around us at all times, it seems. But the sense of speed has maybe never been more apparent. The sense of frantic scrambling has never been more apparent to us. And maybe more than ever, that's why we crave stillness. And perhaps we even romanticize or deify, stillness or figures, personages who have tapped into stillness as their way of life, or stillness is at the heart of their faith or their advocacy. And I think we're drawn to it because we crave it so much. But my argument is, and this is really a central philosophy of mine. And it's funny, I was listening to a very good podcast by Conor Habib. I don't know if you're familiar with Conor Habib. He's an American guy who moved over to Ireland several years ago. He has a very interesting podcast called Against Everyone with Conor Habib. He speaks to all sorts of thinkers and spiritualists and occultists, and maybe people who feel like they might be on the fringes of intellectual thought or popular thought. And he has in-depth conversations with them. He's also a writer. I haven't read his book, but he had a very, very well-received novel that he brought out last year or the year before called Hawk Mountain. And he's funny, and he's really a very interesting guy. He worked as gay, like he's gay, and he worked in kind of gay pornography as a sex worker or sex performer. And he's very open about that history, and why wouldn't he be? So he's kind of like sex positive, and I think his kind of thing, and this is where I was about to draw a connection between himself and myself, just this idea of kind of demystification, because he was speaking about it on a recent episode of his podcast. He did an episode on how he produces his podcasts and the history of how he got into podcasting and when things started to turn and take off, because to my eyes, he's very successful. Everything is relative, of course. But the idea of kind of demystifying things and bringing things down to just a very bare, transparent, attainable level where we can acknowledge or engage with the idea of our own kind of capability and our own resources to go, well, actually, we can do a lot for ourselves. I mean, I really believe this. It's a central tenet of how I view life. We can do an awful lot ourselves for ourselves. And see, the destination idea, where am I going to get to? I think that also feeds into who's the person who can help me change my life? What's the book that can help me change my life? What's the thing outside of me that can help me change my life or improve my life or enhance my life or augment my life? And sometimes I call myself uncurious or uninterested because I do so much sort of reflection on, well, what are my capabilities and how can I serve myself and not be dependent on others? Now, that could just be the philosophical, existential approach of a traumatized child. And there is a certain amount of truth in that, where you've had so many disappointments in your life, in your relationships, familial and otherwise, that you think, it's not safe to depend on others. So I must only depend on myself. And this is a kind of again, going back to the tightrope, this is the line I try to walk, where I'm really interested in people always. And in fact, I was listening to another podcast. There's an American comedian whose name is it Mike Birbiglia, and he has a podcast which, like a lot of people, started being produced during the pandemic. It's called Working on It, and he interviews comedians and talks about their sort of pathway into comedy and then they work on material, which is quite, it's really interesting to kind of, to listen in on kind of the inside world of, of anyone, I suppose, but it's like stand-up comics and how they try to improve jokes or pieces, bits as they call them. But in any case, he was interviewing the Irish actress, writer, comedian Aisling B, who I don't really know. I've come across her, just in, seen her in different articles and whatnot, but I'm not that familiar with her work. But she was great. She was really a really great guest, and she spoke about not having wanderlust, the desire to travel and see places, but perpetually having, I think she said, people lust. Like, she's really endlessly interested in people, and that really chimed with me. I just thought, yeah, I am. I mean, I can be scathing about people, but I find huge. I just find there's so much to be got from engaging with others, and the opportunity to engage with others, particularly on more intimate grounds, as in, I don't mean sexual intimacy, but just, one-to-one or small groups where real conversations can be had and real points of connection can be made. That's definitely a happy place for me as well. And so that's what I was going to say. Like, I walk this line, this kind of tightrope between I'm wary, I'm loath to give too much of myself away, or be tethered to somebody else or dependent on someone else. And yet, I kind of, and again, I did an episode on this last year, the challenge of living with an open heart, and with defences down. Defences over there are very good. Defences here are very bad. So go with the defences over there. That's defences, DEF, okay? Defences, living with defences down, living with an open heart. That's challenging. That's tricky. But again, be on the path. Is that the path you want to be on? With a certain amount of cautious vulnerability. Informed vulnerability. I mean, maybe that might be a nicer way to phrase it. And again, look, that's in a way, like, that's a sort of a martial arts concept, the peaceful warrior. Here's my weapon, but, I'm not going to use it. I'm covering it up. I prefer the peaceful path, if possible. So look, I really think that's all I had to say today. I just, the idea of, pathways, empty spaces, empty moments, arrivals, endpoints. I think the only other thing I was going to say about arrivals is maybe sometimes it's easier to understand arrivals in the past tense. Or, for English language, for English teachers, in the present perfect. What has brought me here? What has brought me to this point? How have I arrived here? So that, I mean, I think that's, it's a worthwhile area to reflect on. So I can go, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I've come. I've arrived at, I've arrived at my 50s, and I can go, well, what path brought me here? What are the things that I've done that led me here to this moment and into, led me to this current existential state, whether, for better or for ill. What are the paths that have brought me here? And, do I, and I don't, frankly, but do I regret the paths I've taken? Do I look back at certain paths with, a frown, with a troubled brow, with concern? I don't know. Sometimes we can understand ourselves better by understanding the past, so we can understand our present selves better by understanding our past selves better. And sometimes we can only understand our past selves by acknowledging the journey that we've been on, and understanding, okay, so that's why I am here now, and that's why I am how I am now is because of that journey and that road I took and that decision I made, or those circumstances and how I responded to them. And maybe this person and how they helped me or shaped me or buffeted me or inspired me or whatever it might be. So, yeah. Where to next? I don't know. I mean, this is my weak area. I get, as I say, maybe that the uninvited, the unwanted guests I referred to earlier, that's where they thrive on, the cloudiness I sometimes experience when I look to the future. And maybe that's the battle I'm in at the moment. And maybe then that does speak to a midlife crisis. Maybe that does speak to an anxiety around the passage of time. Maybe that does speak to something inside me cracking a whip going, come on now, what the hell are you doing? But it's funny, I sit down and do this podcast and 99% of the time I feel very relaxed. So that's nice. That's nice for me. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna sign off. And this is not, I don't think this is the shortest episode I've ever done, but it's considerably shorter than recent ones. I've listened. There's plenty of stuff to talk about. I've some interesting things I want to share. I did sort of flag that last week, and this moment doesn't feel like the moment I want to do it. There's more movies to talk about. I continue my sort of catch up on things I've missed. So maybe I'll hit into that next week. Okay, well that's it. Listen, thank you very much for listening and for choosing this episode. You can follow me on social media if you're interested. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. The podcast always comes up on YouTube as well. I've been very quiet on social media over the last couple of weeks, just Christmas and my birthday and a funny week last week. But yeah, if you enjoy what you hear, throw a review my way, throw me some stars, throw me some love, throw me a rating, share with a friend. And it's, that's the currency of, making podcasts more successful and making them reach more people. So if you think this is a podcast worth sharing, or mine is a voice worth sharing, or if it brought you some sort of comfort or positive provocation or even amusement, they're all good things. So bump it on to someone else. You think, you might like this. This might be your cup of tea. And if you're even more inspired and think, that's an independent podcast with nothing behind it, you can get behind it using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And you can invest in this thing that I do. Because it takes work, it takes effort, and I'd be extremely grateful for whatever you could give. It's just a bit of reciprocation, I suppose. But again, the other things I mentioned before, that's also a way of paying back, and no stress if it's not in your budget to contribute to a podcast. I'm happy for it to be free for you as well, so no stress. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Have a good week, and go back to the archives if you're interested in digging in for more, or look out for whatever comes next. I'll be back. All the best. Take care. Mind yourselves. See ya. Bye.